There's a particular kind of phone call that arrives dressed up as a courtesy, but is really a test. It comes after the pressure has already been applied, after the threats have been made public, after the other side has had a few days to sit in the discomfort. By the time that call lands, the person placing it usually expects one of two things: relief or surrender. Because by the time you're picking up the phone, the story goes, you've already decided you can't win the standoff. So now you just want to know how much it's going to cost you to end it. That's the call Donald Trump placed to Mark Carney this week, days after Washington dropped a 50% tariff wall on a targeted list of Canadian goods using a legal weapon almost nobody outside a handful of trade lawyers had even heard of. Most of the coverage treated it exactly the way you'd expect. 2 leaders, 1 phone call, an agreement to intensify trade talks in the coming weeks. Cordial, constructive, a de-escalation. Move along. Nothing to see here.
But that framing misses the entire point. The interesting thing about that call isn't that it happened, it's what Carney said back, his tone, and the one thing he refused to put on the table before the conversation even started. That answer is why this negotiation doesn't look anything like the one Washington thought it was walking into. By the end of this video, you'll see why the phone call meant to bring Canada to heel actually did the opposite. And stick around, because near the end, I'll give you the honest counter-argument. The part almost nobody covering this is willing to say out loud. Because I don't do cheerleading on this channel. I do analysis. Let's get into it. On the 20th, the White House imposed a 50% tariff on a specific list of Canadian goods, not the broad, everything-across-the-board threat we'd been hearing about for weeks. A surgical list: wine, dairy, cement, certain plastics, and hockey sticks. The tool they reached for wasn't the usual national security justification, or the trade remedy process everyone's used to arguing over. It was Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a statute so old and so rarely used that most people encountering it assumed it was a typo. A Depression-era law dusted off nearly a century later and pointed directly at Ottawa. The White House fact sheet said the quiet part loud. These tariffs were designed to override the duty-free treatment Canadian goods enjoy under the trade agreement between the two countries. Washington wasn't pretending this fit inside the rules. It was reaching outside them, using an obscure Depression-era clause to punch a hole through the deal that's supposed to govern North American trade. And the list, wine, dairy, cement, hockey sticks, wasn't random. It was chosen to sting culturally. To make ordinary Canadians feel the tariff in things they recognize as their own. That's the environment Carney was sitting in when the phone rang. He'd already made his position clear in the days before. He called it a violation of the agreement. But here's the part that confused a lot of people, and it's the part I want you to hold on to because it becomes the whole story. He called it a violation, and in almost the same breath, signaled he was still open to talking. He didn't slam the door. He didn't announce a retaliatory tariff of his own. He didn't match Washington's 50% with a 50% of his own, the way a lot of Canadians wanted him to. To a lot of people, that looked soft. It looked like a prime minister who'd been hit hard and was flinching. I saw the comments. Where's the fight? Why is he so calm while Trump is throwing punches? I understand the frustration, but I want you to consider a different reading, because what looked like softness was actually the most deliberate move on the board. When you refuse to fire back immediately, you keep the ability to choose the moment. You keep the moral high ground, and you keep the other side guessing, which unsettles a negotiator far more than a predictable tit-for-tat. The two leaders agreed to intensify negotiations over the coming weeks. Slow down on that word, intensify, because both sides are using it to mean very different things. From Washington's side, intensify means leverage. The 50% tariff is live. The clock is running. Exporters are already feeling it. So let's sit down fast
and settle this on terms that reflect the pressure applied. But listen to what Carney actually agreed to, and what he didn't. He agreed to intensify talks. He did not agree to negotiate under the tariff as a precondition. He did not accept the 50% as the new baseline both sides now build from. That distinction is the entire ballgame. If Canada treats the 50% tariff as the starting point, every concession it wins gets measured against a wall Washington built illegitimately. That's negotiating your way back to zero and calling it a victory. That's the trap. That's how you lose while thinking you're winning. Carney didn't step into it. His answer, in effect, was simple. Yes, let's talk seriously. But the 50% tariff isn't a fact of life we're bargaining around. It's the illegitimate act we're bargaining about. The tariff isn't the floor. The tariff is the thing on trial. That quiet reframe changed the shape of the negotiation before it had properly begun. Imagine someone breaks your window, then knocks on your door and says, "Great news! I'm willing to discuss how we fix your window." One version of you says, "Okay, let's talk about the window." Now you've accepted the broken window as the problem you're solving. The other version says, "Sure, let's talk about the fact that you broke it and who's paying for it." Same conversation, completely different power dynamic. Carney chose the second version without raising his voice, and that's exactly why it works. Now, let's talk about why Section 338 matters so much. You don't reach for the weird, dusty tool at the back of the shed when the normal tools are working just fine. You reach for it when the normal tools don't fit. That's why the choice of Section 338 matters. It suggests the more conventional legal justifications were becoming much harder to rely on. Carney has spent his career at the intersection of finance, law, and national power, running the Bank of Canada through one crisis and the Bank of England through another. That experience teaches you something important. There's a big difference between a strong hand played loudly and a weak hand played loudly. Trump plays every hand loudly. That's his style. But volume tells you nothing about the cards. Carney appears to have looked at the 50% tariff, looked at the unusual legal foundation supporting it, and concluded that all the noise might be covering a legal position that couldn't survive serious scrutiny. If you believe the other side's move is legally weak, the worst thing you can do is answer with your own legally questionable move. The smarter play is to stay calm, stay clean, keep pointing to the weakness in their case, and let time do part of the work for you. Here's where the story becomes uncomfortable for Washington. Trump made the call. Think about the script the pressure campaign was supposed to produce. Canada was supposed to call Washington. Canada was supposed to ask for relief. Canada was supposed to come to the table under pressure. That's not what happened. The President of the United States reached out to the Prime Minister of Canada. Whatever the diplomatic protocol may be, those aren't the optics of a country that's winning cleanly. And there's another reason. Those tariffs don't only hurt Canadian exporters, they also hit American importers, American businesses, and ultimately, American consumers. Both sides are now racing against the clock. Let's widen the lens for a moment. There's a bigger structural story underneath this phone call. Earlier this month, the United States declined to extend the North American Trade Agreement at its scheduled review. That pushed the agreement into an annual review cycle instead of the long-term stability businesses had grown used to. Many people saw that as bad news for Canada. But look at it another way. An annual review means this isn't settled once and forgotten. The terms stay alive. The leverage doesn't disappear. Every year creates another opportunity to renegotiate. And that kind of environment rewards patience far more than panic. Trump's negotiating style depends on urgency, deadlines, pressure, pay now, deal now. before the other side has time to adjust. But a rolling annual review works differently. It rewards the country that's willing to wait, diversify, and build alternatives over time. That's exactly the kind of long-game approach Carney has spent his career practicing. So when he agreed to intensify negotiations, he wasn't agreeing to a sprint. He was agreeing to a race that may last much longer than Washington expected.
Now let's talk about the honest counterargument, because no strategy is guaranteed to work. Carney's entire approach depends on patience. It depends on diversification. And it depends on time. But Canada still sells the overwhelming majority of its exports to one customer, the United States. You can't rebuild decades of supply chains, pipelines, factories, and export markets overnight. Diversification is real, but it's slow, expensive, and politically difficult. Meanwhile, the tariff is already here, and businesses are already feeling the impact.
That's where the political pressure begins. If this calm strategy starts costing Canadian jobs, workers won't care that the long-term plan might succeed years from now. They'll care about this quarter, this month, this paycheck. Trump also faces political pressure. He has his own election calendar, his own supporters, his own businesses demanding answers. So the real question isn't whether one side faces pressure. Both do. The question is, whose political patience runs out first? That's the gamble. And nobody knows the answer yet. So here's where I land. This phone call was supposed to bring Canada to the table on Washington's terms. Instead, it became the moment Canada agreed to negotiate without accepting the tariff as the price of admission. It shifted the conversation away from how much Canada would concede and toward whether the American move itself could be justified. That doesn't mean Canada has already won. It doesn't mean the tariff disappears. It simply means the shape of the negotiation has changed. Now, I want to hear from you. Was Carney right to stay calm? Or should Canada have responded immediately with tariffs of its own? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.